the genius within, why everything you know might be a lie. Have you ever asked yourself why you believe what you believe? Not in a surface level way. I mean deeply, radically. Imagine this: every idea you have, every assumption about yourself, the world, success, love, and greatness, what if they're just inherited patterns, copies of copies, shadows on the wall of Plato's cave? That's where we begin. Because if you want to think like a genius, the first step is to admit you might not be thinking at all. You might just be remembering, mimicking, reacting. Geniuses, from Socrates to Elon Musk, begin by destroying the illusion of knowledge. They don't build on top of assumptions, they dive beneath them. They ask, what is the most basic, undeniable truth here? And from there they reconstruct reality. That's the first principle mindset. And yes, you can learn it. Let me tell you a secret. The reason most people never reach genius level thinking isn't because they lack intelligence. It's because they never dare to ask the forbidden questions. The ones that threaten their identity. The ones that unravel certainty. Questions like, what if everything I was taught about success is wrong? What if hard work isn't the key, but understanding? What if fear is not to be avoided, but decoded? You know what? These questions scare people. But genius lives inside that fear. Geniuses don't run from it, they interrogate it. They sit with it. They ask it to reveal its secrets. And when it does, they emerge with clarity that looks like magic to the rest of us. But it's not magic. It's method. And it's available to everyone if you're willing to think dangerously.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, let's break this down. First principles thinking isn't just about asking why over and over. That's a start, but it's more surgical than that. It's about reducing complexity into elemental truths. It's like stripping layers of paint off a masterpiece to get back to the original brushstrokes. Geniuses don't accept things as they appear, they ask, what is this made of? For example, if you want to be rich, most people will tell you, get a job, work hard, climb the ladder. But a first principles thinker asks, what is money? What creates value? Why do humans exchange it? What makes it grow? And suddenly they're not climbing ladders, they're building elevators. They're not playing the game, they're designing it. So I ask you, what's something you've always believed and have never questioned? Here's the twist. First principles thinking isn't just a mental tool, it's a spiritual practice. It requires humility. The humility to say, I don't know. The courage to say, I was wrong. The patience to rebuild your worldview from scratch. And that's hard. Our egos cling to what we know because uncertainty feels like death. But here's the truth. The death of certainty is the birth of genius. Every great thinker had to go through this crucible. They had to destroy their false beliefs, their inherited dogmas, their comfortable illusions. And that's why most people stop. They want genius without the pain. But the pain is the price. So the question is, how much do you want to see? Let's go deeper. You remember that kid in school who always asked, why? The one who annoyed everyone, even the teacher. That's the seed of genius. But somewhere along the way, society teaches us to stop. It rewards answers, not questions. It praises memorization, not exploration. And so we grow up thinking that knowledge is about having the right answer, when in fact, it's about asking the right question. Let me give you an example. Most people look at a tree and think, it's just a tree. But a genius might ask, what is life? How does this organism convert sunlight into structure? What does it mean to grow? And suddenly the tree becomes a teacher. The world becomes a classroom. And your mind becomes a universe. Now, let's talk about the most dangerous assumption, that we are rational beings. We're not. We're stories wearing skin. Most of our thoughts are emotional reactions dressed up in logic. We believe what feels good and then we justify it with facts. That's why first principles thinking is so rare, it requires emotional courage. It forces you to look at the parts of yourself you've been hiding from, your fears, your biases, your contradictions, and then to think anyway, and to think through them. You don't just analyze the world, you analyze yourself. You dissect your own beliefs like a surgeon operating on their own brain. It's terrifying, and it's liberating. So how do we start? Simple. Pick a belief. Any belief. I'm not creative. I need a college degree to succeed. People can't change. Now ask, what evidence do I have? What's the origin of this idea? Is it based on experience or inheritance? What happens if I reverse it? What if the opposite is true? This is the mental gym. This is how you build philosophical muscle. And just like physical training, it's uncomfortable at first. But over time, you start to see patterns. You start to catch yourself believing lies. You start to think for yourself. And that's the moment everything changes. Here's a challenge. For the next 24 hours, question everything. Why do you wake up at this time? Why do you eat this food? Why do you believe your job matters? Why are you watching this video? And here's the trick, don't rush to answers. Sit in the discomfort. Let the unknown echo. Because inside that silence, that space between thoughts, is where genius is born. That's where breakthroughs happen. Not in noise, but in stillness. Not in certainty, but in doubt. Geniuses aren't people with all the answers, they're people who live in the questions. Let's zoom out. Why does this matter? Because the world is changing faster than ever. Institutions are crumbling. Truth is fragmented. The old ways don't work. And in a time like this, the ability to think clearly, to think from first principles, isn't just powerful. It's necessary. It's survival. The people who will thrive in this new world aren't the ones with the most credentials. They're the ones who can adapt, who can unlearn, who can see the hidden patterns, who can ask what is really going on here, and then act from that place. So I ask you again, are you willing to think dangerously? Let me leave you with this. You are not your thoughts. You are the thinker. And when you realize that, you gain power. The power to choose better thoughts, or to build better models, to construct a worldview that's not inherited, but earned. That's what first principles thinking is. It's not just a method, it's a new mind. And that mind can change everything. Your career, your relationships, your sense of self. But you have to choose it. You have to earn it. So are you ready to rebuild your reality? The cat, the mirror, and the universe, how intuition, nature, and thought collide into genius. Let's begin with a story, not just any story, but one that's so ordinary it almost disappears. A cat, sitting in a window, watching the wind move through the trees. You've seen it before, right? But here's the question: what is the cat seeing that we don't? Is it simply observing motion, or is it sensing something deeper, something primal, intuitive, ancient? When animals freeze, when they stare, when they hiss at what isn't visible to us, perhaps they aren't just reacting, they're receiving. And maybe, just maybe, the genius of nature lies in its silent warnings. The cat becomes a mirror, reflecting the subtle vibrations of a world we've forgotten how to feel. And if we want to think like geniuses, we must first learn how to sense like animals. This is not mysticism. This is logic. Intuition is not the opposite of reason, it's the foundation of it. Before any thought is formed, there is a feeling, or knowing. The cat doesn't reason its way to fear, it senses it. And that's the first layer of genius most people ignore. Because we've been taught to distrust the irrational, the emotional, the instinctive. But genius doesn't reject the irrational, it integrates it. It listens to the whispers of the unconscious. It sees the patterns before the patterns are spoken. Think of Einstein imagining himself riding on a beam of light. That was intuition. It wasn't a formula, it was a feeling. But it led to a theory that changed the universe. So here's a question: what are you feeling right now that you haven't yet turned into thought? Look at nature, not just as scenery, but as a system of intelligence. Trees don't move, but they communicate through roots, through fungi, through chemical signals in the air. They warn each other of danger. They shift their growth in response to trauma. And yet, we walk past them like they're furniture. We forget we're animals too. We forget our minds are not separate from the soil, the stars, the storms. The genius thinker doesn't separate themselves from the world, they merge with it. They study it not as an object, but as a mirror. They ask, what is this thing trying to teach me? A cat staring into the void might not be confused, but attuned. So again, I ask, what are you ignoring because it doesn't speak in words? Here's where it gets real. Most of us live in conceptual prisons. We believe in categories. We divide reality into important and trivial, scientific and superstitious, rational and emotional. But reality doesn't care about your labels. Genius happens when you break those categories, when you allow contradiction to exist, when you let one part of your brain watch the cat, and the other part write equations, and the third part wonder if the cat is warning you of something you've forgotten to remember. First principles thinking isn't about being mechanical, it's about being whole. It's about seeing the totality of existence without filtering it through habit. It's about asking, what if everything is connected, and I've just been trained not to see it? Let me tell you something profound. The greatest thinkers didn't just think they felt the truth before they could prove it. Newton felt the force of gravity before he measured it. Da Vinci sketched flying machines not because he had data, but because he sensed it was possible. Genius isn't about being right, it's about being perceptive. The cat staring into the wind is a genius in its own right, because it sees what it sees without needing permission. It doesn't need consensus. It doesn't need validation. It simply knows. And so do you. Deep down, there's a part of you that already knows what you need to do. It's just buried under noise. So the question becomes, can you silence the noise long enough to hear the signal? Let's shift gears. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror, but this mirror doesn't reflect your face. It reflects your mind, all your beliefs, your fears, your assumptions. Now imagine one belief suddenly shatters. like glass, gone. What happens next? Most people panic. They scramble to replace it. But a genius pauses. They stare into the void left behind, not with fear, but with curiosity. They ask, what was I seeing through this belief? What did it prevent me from seeing? That's how mirrors become portals. That's how thought becomes transformation. When you question how you think, you begin to think differently. And when you think differently, the world changes because your perception is the world. Ask yourself, what's the last belief you shattered? Not a small one, a core one. Something that made you feel unstable. Something that forced you to rebuild. If the answer is never, then you haven't yet touched genius. Because genius requires destruction. It requires the death of old thought. It doesn't just add new ideas, it burns the old ones to the ground. That's terrifying. But it's also freedom. Because once you realize that your mind is a construction, you gain the power to reconstruct it. And that's the essence of first principles. Not just breaking things down, but building from truth. Let's return to nature. Imagine watching ants build a colony. Every movement seems chaotic, random, but zoom out and you see the pattern, the structure, the intelligence. This is what genius does, it zooms out. It sees the invisible order behind visible chaos. It sees that life isn't random, it's recursive. It loops, it echoes, it rhymes. Your fears, echoes of ancient instincts. Your dreams, recursions of deep truths. But you can't see this from ground level. You have to rise above. And how do you rise? You question. You observe. You listen. You wonder. Most people watch the ants. Geniuses become the sky. Now let's blend it all together. The cat, the mirror, the universe. These are not separate metaphors. They are the same thing. The cat is your intuition. The mirror is your mind. The universe is your canvas. And first principles thinking is the bridge between all three. It teaches you to trust your perception, refine your observation, and construct your understanding from scratch. It doesn't matter what the world tells you. It matters what you see. And then, what you do with what you see. Because genius is not passive, it's active. It's the courage to act on insights that others ignore. Let me leave you with a final question. What if the next great idea isn't something you need to invent, but something you need to notice? What if genius isn't about thinking harder, but about seeing clearer? What if the cat is trying to teach you something right now and all you have to do is watch? Burn the map, rebuilding your mind from zero to infinity. Let's begin with something radical. Burn the map. Yes, the one in your mind. The one labeled how things are, what's possible, what's real. Because here's the truth, every map you've ever been handed was drawn by someone else. Parents, teachers, society, even your past self. But none of them had access to the full terrain of your potential. And if you want to think like a genius, you can't navigate life using inherited directions. You must rediscover the terrain with your own steps, your own eyes, your own mind. This is the essence of first principles, not just breaking things down, but building them back up from zero. And zero is terrifying because it's infinite. Let's sit with that for a moment. Zero is not nothing. It's everything in potential. When you strip away all assumptions, all inherited beliefs, all second-hand truths, you're left with a blank canvas. That's where genius begins, not with knowledge, but with emptiness. It's the mind of a child seeing the world for the first time. Pure, unfiltered, curious. And yet, how many of us cling to our old maps because we're afraid of getting lost? But here's the paradox. The only way to find yourself is to get lost on purpose, to wander, to unlearn, to erase the lines and let the territory redraw itself. So ask yourself, what mental map are you still following that no longer serves you? Let's go deeper. Rebuilding your mind from zero doesn't mean rejecting all knowledge. It means interrogating it. You become an intellectual architect. Every belief must earn its place. Every assumption must pass the test. Does this idea serve reality or just my comfort? Is this belief based on evidence or on fear? Most people decorate their mental house with furniture they inherited, but geniuses redesign the foundation. They don't just move things around, they ask, why was this here in the first place? And when the answer isn't good enough, they tear it down. Not out of destruction, but creation. Genius isn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's construction from clarity. These three questions are dynamite. They explode the false walls of the mind. Try it. Take a problem in your life, money, love, purpose, and run it through those questions. You'll be shocked at how many invisible rules you've been obeying, rules no one ever told you to question. But the genius questions everything not out of doubt, but out of devotion to truth. They don't care if an idea is popular. They care if it's true. Because truth is the only compass worth following once the map is burned. Now, let's talk about fear. The fear of the unknown. The fear of looking foolish. The fear of being wrong. These are the dragons that guard the gates of genius. And most people stop at the gate. But geniuses, they walk through the fire. They make peace with uncertainty. They see fear not as an obstacle but as a signal. A neon sign that says, this is where the breakthrough lies. Every time you feel afraid to question something, that's exactly what you need to question. Genius isn't the absence of fear, it's intimacy with it. So here's a brutal question. What truth are you avoiding because it would force you to change? This is where the journey gets uncomfortable. When you start thinking from first principles, you don't just change your ideas, you change your identity. An identity is sticky. It resists change. It says, no, this is who I am. This is what I believe. But genius doesn't cling to identity, it evolves it. It's like shedding skin. Old beliefs fall away. Old desires dissolve. Old versions of you die. And in their place, something new emerges. Not a better version. A truer one. One that wasn't built by fear or imitation, but by insight. So next time you feel your identity cracking, don't panic. Smile, because that's how the light gets in. Let's zoom out. Why does any of this matter? Because we are entering an age where thinking from inherited assumptions is not just unhelpful, it's dangerous. AI, climate change, political polarization, existential risk, these aren't problems you can solve with yesterday's logic. They require new minds, and new minds require new thinking. Thinking that doesn't just rearrange the old furniture, but reinvents the house. That's what genius is, a new house of thought, built on the solid ground of truth, not the shifting sand of tradition. So I ask you, are you willing to become a new mind in an old world? Here's the twist. Most people think genius is lonely. But it's not. It's liberating. When you free your mind, you invite others to do the same. You become a signal, a lighthouse. You start to attract other minds who are also breaking free. And together, you don't just think differently, you live differently. You build things. You write things. You lead things. You become the thing that others thought was impossible. First principles thinking isn't just about ideas, it's about impact. It's about changing the world by first changing the way you see it. Let me give you a closing metaphor. Imagine your mind as a piece of land. Most people inherit a house built by others. They live in it. They decorate it. But they never question the foundation. Now imagine demolishing that house, standing in the rubble, and then, with your own hands, building a new structure, one that fits you, one that reflects reality, one that can withstand any storm. That's what first principles thinking builds, not just genius ideas, but genius minds. And those minds can do anything. So I ask you one final time, are you ready to burn the map and build the future? Because the future doesn't belong to the clever. It belongs to the clear. And clarity comes not from knowing more, but from knowing what's real. And that journey begins now with a question, a pause, and the courage to think again.